There comes a moment in every empath's life when the weight of pleasing others becomes too heavy to carry. A moment when the constant nodding, the endless yes, spoken against the whisper of an inner no, finally shatters under its own exhaustion. And in that stillness, something new arises. At first, it feels like betrayal. Betrayal of love, of compassion, of the very fabric of what you believed made you good. But in truth, it is not betrayal at all. It is a return to the untouched core of your being, where compassion has never been distorted by guilt or fear, where it flows like a clear spring, free and unburdened. Carl Jung called this individuation the process of becoming who you truly are. And if we were to borrow the language of quantum science, it is like watching an electron leap to a higher orbit. There is a rupture, a pause, a plunge into shadow. Yet in that very leap, light is released. That is what happens when an empath finally stops trying to hold the world together by self-erasure and begins to see reality as it is. Not only does their life transform, but they ignite a new field of energy around them, one that others can feel, one that calls forth authenticity in anyone brave enough to step closer. You see, for most of their lives, empaths believe love is sacrifice. They believe that to be kind, they must carry everyone else's pain, often at the expense of their own body, their own peace, their own sanity. And society applauds this. The world tells them they are good, noble, selfless, but the body keeps a quiet score. The nervous system trembles under the weight of emotions that were never theirs to hold. Sleepless nights, anxious hearts, tired bones. These are not signs of compassion. They are signs of overextension, of a life tilted away from balance. Then comes that breaking point, that sacred pause. It could arrive after yet another night of tears held back, after another gathering where you smile while burning inside, or perhaps in the silence of an afternoon where exhaustion finally overtakes you. And in that silence, a question surfaces, as if from nowhere, though it has lived inside you all along. What if I stopped? What if I stopped trying to be everything for everyone? What if I let go of the mask? That question is not rebellion. It is awakening. It is the spark of consciousness breaking through the fog of conditioning. In quantum terms, it is the observer effect. The moment you stop unconsciously replaying the script and instead look at it, truly look at it, the act of observation itself begins to change the pattern. And yes, it is frightening, because for the empath, to stop pleasing feels like stepping into darkness. You fear being called selfish. You fear being abandoned. You fear that love itself will vanish if you dare to show your true face. But the paradox is this: only by daring to stop, only by daring to look inward, do you discover the love that cannot be taken away, the love that arises from within, not from the approval of others. Imagine it like a river that has spent its whole existence forcing itself upstream, against the current, in order to water every thirsty field around it. One day, it grows too weak to push, and in that weakness, it lets go. It turns, and it flows in its natural direction. And suddenly, the river is no longer depleted. It is alive again. That is the moment when the empath stops betraying themselves. That is the moment compassion becomes real. No longer a duty or a burden, but an effortless expression of being. Jung was right. Individuation is not comfortable. It feels like death, because in a way, it is. The death of the false self. The self stitched together from everyone else's needs and expectations. But just as a seed must split apart before the tree can grow, so too must the empath's mask fall away before their true face can emerge. And here is where quantum language becomes powerful. Every empath, in that moment of release, collapses an old timeline. They step out of the frequency of self-abandonment and into a higher vibration of sovereignty. The universe, which once reflected back endless mirrors of exploitation, begins to shift. New people appear. Old patterns dissolve. The field responds not to what you do, but to the vibration you hold. So, when you stop pleasing everyone, you do not become selfish. You become aligned. You stop being an unconscious participant in a script written by survival, and you begin to author your own. And that authorship, that conscious alignment, is the most loving act you could ever offer the world. Because the world does not need another exhausted soul giving from depletion. The world needs your light burning steadily, your voice speaking clearly, your presence radiating wholeness. This is not about turning away from compassion. It is about allowing compassion to include you. It is not about shutting down your heart. It is about opening it in both directions, outward to others and inward to yourself. And if you are listening right now, and you feel that question rising in your own chest, what if I stopped? Know that you are standing on the edge of your own quantum leap. A leap not into isolation, but into authenticity. Not into selfishness, but into sovereignty. So, breathe. Trust the pause. Trust that the breaking point you fear may actually be the doorway to your breakthrough. Because when you stop betraying yourself, you do not lose love, you return to it. 1. From loneliness to stillness. There comes a time, after the masks have fallen and the endless roles of pleasing have been set aside, when the silence feels almost unbearable. For so long, your life was filled with the noise of others. Their needs, their emotions, their voices echoing louder than your own. And when that noise fades, when you stop carrying what isn't yours, what remains is a silence so deep, it can feel like emptiness. Many call it loneliness. It creeps in at night, when the phone doesn't ring, when the invitations stop arriving, when the world no longer leans on you for comfort. You look around, and the absence feels sharp, like a cold wind brushing against an unguarded heart. But Carl Jung spoke of something important here. He reminded us that there is a difference between loneliness and stillness. Loneliness is the ache of being disconnected from others. Stillness, on the other hand, is the blessing of being connected to yourself. The two may look the same from the outside. A quiet room, a solitary walk, a life without constant chatter. But the inner landscape is entirely different. Loneliness is hungry, restless, reaching outward for someone to fill the void. Stillness is abundant, restful, content to sit in the richness of its own company. At first, you may not know the difference. The transition from people-pleasing to authenticity often strips away the scaffolding of relationships built on duty. You begin to see who was there for you and who was there for what you provided. And as those false ties dissolve, the nights may grow long, and you may find yourself staring at ceilings, wondering if you've made a terrible mistake by choosing yourself. This is the valley of loneliness, and it is real. But if you stay with it, if you allow yourself to walk through the shadow without rushing to escape, something miraculous happens. The loneliness begins to soften. The silence stops sounding like an accusation and starts feeling like a sanctuary. You realize you are not actually empty. You are spacious. You are not lacking. You are opening. And in that space, in that quiet, you begin to hear something you have missed for years. The gentle whisper of your own soul. It is a sound easily drowned out by the noise of a busy, demanding world. But in stillness, it becomes clear. Perhaps it arrives as a memory of something you once loved but abandoned. Perhaps it comes as an image of a path you never took. Perhaps it is as simple as the rhythm of your breath, reminding you that life itself is already holding you, even when no one else is. This is not loneliness anymore. This is communion. Communion with the deepest part of yourself. Think of it like a forest in winter. At first glance, it looks barren. The trees stripped bare, the air sharp and empty. But if you stay long enough, You notice the hidden life, the quiet strength of roots holding steady beneath the frozen soil, the subtle beauty of branches etched against a pale sky. The stillness is not dead. It is alive in a different way. So too, with your inner stillness. What looked like emptiness reveals itself as depth. In this stillness, a profound shift begins. You stop chasing validation. You stop fearing silence. You begin to understand that the presence you were searching for in others was always meant to be discovered within yourself. This is what Jung pointed to when he spoke of individuation. The journey is not just about separating from the crowd. It is about meeting the one person you had overlooked the most. You. And here is the secret many do not tell when you find peace in your own stillness. You stop being desperate for company. And paradoxically, that is when the right company finds you. The frequency changes. You no longer radiate the vibration of emptiness that pulls in users and takers. Instead, you radiate wholeness. And wholeness attracts those who honor it. But even if no one comes right away, you are no longer afraid. You know how to sit with yourself. And you know that solitude does not mean abandonment. It means alignment. You discover, as many before you have, that stillness is not the absence of life. It is the presence of essence. So if you are in that space right now, sitting in the quiet after the noise has gone, wondering if the silence will break you, take heart. You are not being punished. You are being reintroduced to yourself. You are not lost. You are arriving. Loneliness may be the doorway, but stillness is the home. And when you learn to rest there, when you no longer run from the silence, you will find that you are never truly alone. For in that stillness, you are held by something larger than yourself. The field of life itself, vast, gentle, and unshakably present. 2. The shadow and the buried truth. There is a part of us that we spend years trying not to see. A part that feels too raw, too heavy, too shameful to bring into the light. Jung called it the shadow. And for most empaths, this shadow is not filled with cruelty or malice, as they often fear. No, it carries something much quieter, but perhaps even more unsettling, the anger they were never allowed to feel, the needs they were taught to silence, and the voice they were pressured to bury. From childhood, many empaths were told, directly or indirectly, that to be loved meant to be agreeable, to keep the peace, to soften every edge. And so, whenever anger rose, it was swallowed. Whenever a need surfaced, it was quickly suppressed. Whenever the soul wanted to cry out, it was hushed by the command to be good. Over time, the shadow grew heavy with all that was disowned. And yet, like anything denied, it never disappeared. It simply waited. The truth is, the shadow is not your enemy. It is your unspoken ally. It holds the parts of you that you thought would cost you love. It stores the anger that was actually a compass pointing to your boundaries. It keeps safe the desires that were brushed aside as selfish. It shelters the voice that trembled too much to speak. All of these are not evidence of your darkness. They are evidence of your humanity. When an empath finally dares to look at this shadow, it can feel terrifying. It's like stepping into a basement you've avoided for years, fearing what might lurk inside. But when the light of awareness begins to flicker across those hidden corners, you see the truth. What you feared was not a monster, but your own forgotten self. You realize that your rage is not destructive, but protective. It is the fire that rises when your soul whispers, "Enough." And here's the miracle: once you acknowledge this shadow, you stop being controlled by it. Because whether you look at it or not, the shadow acts out. Suppressed anger leaks into exhaustion. Silenced needs show up as resentment. Buried voices create a constant ache of invisibility. But when you sit with these parts, when you allow them to be seen without judgment, they lose their grip. The basement is no longer a haunted place. It becomes a storeroom of treasures. waiting to be reclaimed. This is where discernment begins to grow. Before, when you denied your shadow, you were easy prey for those who wanted to take advantage. You mistook manipulation for love, crisis for connection, neediness for intimacy. You gave endlessly because you didn't know that your no was just as holy as your yes. But when you integrate your shadow, you stop projecting light onto those who do not carry it. You no longer confuse exploitation with affection. You start to see clearly some people were never loving you. They were feeding on you. And that realization is not bitter. It is liberating. For the first time, you understand that choosing yourself is not abandoning others. It is abandoning the illusions that kept you trapped. You recognize that the ones who truly love you will never demand your silence, will never punish your boundaries, will never shame your needs. They will honor you because you honor yourself. Facing the shadow is not about becoming harsh or cruel. It is about becoming conscious. Conscious enough to know where your energy belongs and where it is being drained. Conscious enough to recognize manipulation, not as a puzzle to solve, but as a signal to walk away. Conscious enough to differentiate between true compassion and compulsive caretaking. It's a little like tuning a radio. Before, your frequency was set to pick up every cry, every plea, every manipulation, because you believed you had to respond. But once you meet your shadow, once you reclaim those denied parts, the static clears, the channel sharpens. You begin to broadcast at a new frequency, one of clarity, strength, and quiet sovereignty. And at that frequency, the emotional vampires lose their power. They cannot reach you anymore, because you no longer unconsciously invite them in. You might wonder, what happens to the anger once it's acknowledged? Does it consume you? The answer is no. The anger, when brought into the light, transforms. It becomes fuel for boundaries, courage for truth-telling, and fire for authentic living. The very energy that once frightened you becomes the strength that protects your softness. The shadow, once embraced, becomes the guardian of your light. So if you are walking through this stage, if you feel the stirrings of anger, if your needs are rising louder, if your silenced voice is trembling to speak, do not push it back down. Sit with it, breathe with it, ask it what it has been trying to tell you all these years. You may be surprised by the wisdom it holds. Remember this, you do not become cruel by facing your shadow. You become real. And in becoming real, you finally free yourself from illusions. You stop dancing for approval. You stop bleeding for attention. You start choosing consciously who to let close, who to keep at a distance, and most importantly, when to choose yourself. And that, my friend, is the beginning of liberation. The shadow is not a curse. It is the part of you that has been waiting for your return. 3. The reversal of energy flow. There comes a season in life when you realize you have poured so much of yourself outward that you've forgotten what it feels like to be filled. For empaths, this is the quiet tragedy of living. To give and give until the well runs dry, and then to keep lowering the bucket into emptiness, hoping something will appear. And for a while, it works. The applause of others, their gratitude, their relief when you show up to shoulder their burdens. It feels like nourishment. But eventually, the body speaks. The soul whispers. The exhaustion becomes undeniable. You reach a point where giving feels less like love and more like bleeding. And then, one day, something shifts. Perhaps it's subtle, like waking up and realizing you cannot bear another conversation where you pretend to be fine. Perhaps it's dramatic, like a breakdown, a collapse, a final straw that cracks the pattern wide open. But however it arrives, it brings with it a new rhythm. The current of energy, which for years has flowed outward to everyone else, begins to turn. Instead of leaking, it pools. Instead of escaping, It gathers. Instead of dissipating, it begins to return home. To you, at first, this reversal feels unnatural. After all, you've built an identity on being the giver, the caretaker, the one others can always count on. So when you start holding some of that energy for yourself, guilt rises. The mind accuses, am I being selfish? Am I abandoning people? But here is the truth. And it is a truth rooted in both spiritual wisdom and quantum law. Nothing in the universe can radiate indefinitely without first sustaining its own core. Think of the stars. They shine because their centers are alive with fire. If that inner fusion ceases, the light does not simply dim politely, it collapses. The star can no longer give what it does not have. And so it is with you. Your light is not endless unless it is fed. Your love is not infinite unless it is renewed. Your compassion cannot stretch forever unless it is anchored in your own well-being. To deny yourself in the name of giving is not generosity. It is slow erosion. When the energy begins to turn inward, something remarkable happens. You feel vitality returning to places you thought were permanently numb. You notice moments of joy appearing in the quiet corners of your day. Even your body begins to soften, to release the tension it held for years, as you absorbed what was not yours. Sleep deepens, breath steadies. You begin to recognize that rest is not laziness, but sacred repair. This inward flow does not make you cold. It makes you clear, because when your energy is yours again, you can finally see which relationships drain you and which ones nourish you. Before, it was all blurred. Everyone's needs sounded urgent. Everyone's crisis felt like your responsibility. But now, with your reservoir filling, you realize that some of those demands were never genuine. They were simply hooks, pulling at your endless willingness, and you no longer bite the hook. There is a peace in this reversal that words can barely describe. It's like a river that has spent years forcing itself upstream, exhausting its strength against the current, only to finally surrender and flow the way it was meant to. The moment it turns, the water does not stop being a river. It simply becomes alive again. That is what happens when you allow your energy to return to you. You do not stop loving. You stop forcing love. You do not stop caring. You stop bleeding in the name of care. Some people around you will not like this change. They may accuse you of being distant, unavailable, or different, and they are right. You are different, because for the first time, you are no longer abandoning yourself. You are no longer giving from depletion. And here is the paradox. When you give from overflow rather than emptiness, what you offer is purer, stronger, and more sustainable. You no longer give to earn love. You give because love is already present within you. This is not selfishness. This is alignment. In fact, it is the very opposite of selfishness, because selfishness drains both you and others. Alignment, on the other hand, allows your light to keep burning, which in turn allows others to feel its warmth. The reversal of energy flow is not the end of your compassion. It is the beginning of your true radiance. If you are standing at the edge of this shift, feeling the current beginning to change, do not resist it. Trust that the universe itself runs on cycles of expansion and contraction, giving and receiving. Even the ocean breathes this way. Waves rushing outward, waves returning inward. Your life, too, was never meant to be a one-way tide. And so I say to you, let the energy come back. Let it fill your lungs, your heart, your bones. Let it remind you that you are not just a source for others. You are also a sanctuary for yourself. When you honor this truth, when you allow your inner fire to be fed, your outer light does not dim. It shines brighter than ever before. 4. The healing of the body. For many empaths, the body becomes a silent witness to years of carrying what was never theirs. You may not realize it at first. It begins quietly. In the background, restless nights, tension that won't release, headaches that arrive without reason, a heaviness in the chest you can't explain. Doctors may tell you it's stress, anxiety, or fatigue, and they're right, but not in the way they think. Because beneath those symptoms lies something deeper, the residue of emotions you absorbed day after day, year after year, until your body became a vault for pain that did not belong to you. The truth is, the body remembers what the mind tries to dismiss. Every sigh you swallowed, every outburst you held back, every grief you carried for someone else. Your body took it in. It stored it in your shoulders, in your stomach, in your nervous system. And while you smiled to keep the peace, your cells trembled under the weight of the unspoken. It is no wonder that so many empaths live with chronic fatigue, digestive troubles, or inexplicable aches. The body cannot lie. It tells the truth. You refuse to admit. But something extraordinary happens when you stop carrying the burdens that were never yours to hold. When you finally say, "No more. I return what is not mine," the body begins to exhale. The knots start to loosen. The restless nights soften into deeper sleep. The chest opens. The breath expands. And the tension you thought was permanent starts to dissolve like mist in morning light. What felt like random pain reveals itself as old energy finally leaving. Quantum science would describe this as a reordering of your energy field. Years of absorbing outside vibrations left your system tangled, chaotic, overloaded. But when the mind grows still, when the heart stops clinging to others' storms, the field reorganizes, coherence returns, harmonie re-emerges. It's like tuning an instrument that has been played out of key for far too long. With each conscious breath, each boundary honored, the strings of your being fall back into resonance. This healing is not dramatic. It is subtle, like the way dawn replaces darkness without fanfare. You may notice it in the way you wake with more ease, how your body no longer drags itself through the day, how the aches quiet down when you stop absorbing the noise of everyone around you. You realize that wellness was never completely gone. It was simply buried under the weight of what you were never meant to hold. And here is a truth that might surprise you. Your body does not need you to fix it. It only needs you to stop betraying it. Healing is not always about doing more, taking more, striving more. Often, it is about releasing what does not belong, allowing the body to return to the balance it has always known. When the mind is at war, the body suffers. But when the mind rests, the body remembers how to restore itself. Think of a garden. If weeds invade and choke the roots, the flowers struggle to bloom. But the gardener's job is not to force the flowers to grow. It is to clear the weeds, to create space for what is natural to thrive. Your body works the same way. It does not need you to demand health. It needs you to clear away the foreign burdens that suffocate it. Once you stop feeding it with stress and unclaimed sorrow, it finds its rhythm again. As someone who has walked through years of carrying invisible weight, I can tell you the first night you sleep deeply after years of restless tossing feels like a miracle. The first morning you wake without that ache in your back feels like a blessing. And yet, it is not magic. It is simply your body thanking you for finally listening. This is why self-care is not a luxury for empaths. It is a necessity, not the kind of self-care sold in magazines. Bubble baths and scented candles, though those have their place. I mean the radical act of self-care that says, I will not use my body as a dumping ground for the world's pain anymore. I will let my body be mine again. That choice, simple as it sounds, is revolutionary. And yes, the healing is gradual. Years of carrying pain will not vanish overnight, but each day you honor your boundaries. Each time you breathe into stillness instead of absorbing chaos, you give your body room to repair. Cells regenerate, muscles release, the nervous system steadies. Healing is not a future event. It is the natural response of the body when you stop wounding it. So, if you find yourself weary, if your body aches in ways you can't explain, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, whose pain am I carrying? Whose burden is this? And if the answer is not yours, give yourself permission to let it go. You were never meant to hold the whole world inside your skin. When you release what is not yours, your body remembers what it feels like to be home. And in that remembering, healing becomes not just possible, it becomes inevitable. 5. Sacred boundaries. There comes a point in every empath's journey where you realize that love without limits is not love at all. It is surrendering yourself to erosion. For years, you may have believed that to be good meant to be endlessly available, to never say no, to open your arms so wide that anyone, no matter their intent, could step inside. And for a while, you convince yourself this is noble, that carrying everyone's weight makes you compassionate. But slowly, you notice the cracks forming. Resentment seeps in. Exhaustion deepens. The quiet ache of feeling unseen, even as you pour out everything you have, grows heavier. It is then, often through pain, that you begin to learn the truth. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are clarity. They are not a wall built to shut the world out. They are a gate. And every gate requires discernment. Not everyone who knocks deserves to be let in. Not every request is yours to answer. And not every demand for your time, your body, your energy is sacred. At first, saying no feels impossible. The word catches in your throat like a stone. You hear the old voices rise up, the ones that told you no one would love you if you weren't agreeable, the ones that whispered you were selfish if you refused. But slowly, through trembling practice, you begin to discover a freedom you never knew before. The first time you say no without apology, something shifts. You realize that love built on obligation is not love at all. And the ones who truly value you will not crumble when you draw a line. The beauty of sacred boundaries is that they are not about pushing people away. They are about protecting what is tender within you. They are the invisible lines that say, I will not abandon myself to keep you comfortable. I will not sacrifice my peace to soothe your chaos. I will not silence my truth to amplify your noise. In this way, boundaries are not selfishness. They are self-respect, made visible. Quantum science would describe it this way. Every being carries a field of energy, and when that field is open without discernment, it becomes vulnerable to interference. But when the field is defined, when you know where you end, and another begins, coherence strengthens. Your frequency stabilizes. You are no longer pulled apart by every demand, every plea, every manipulation. You hold your center, and in doing so, you radiate more steadily. This does not mean you stop loving. In fact, it means you love more purely, because when you no longer give from guilt, your yes becomes real. When you no longer say yes to avoid rejection, your love is no longer a performance. It is a choice, and love that is chosen, not coerced, is the only love that lasts. Many fear that boundaries will make them cold or distant, but the opposite is true. Boundaries allow you to stay open without being consumed. They allow you to offer warmth without burning out. They allow you to stand close without disappearing. Without boundaries, connection becomes suffocation. With them, the connection becomes sacred exchange. You will notice that some people resist your boundaries. They will accuse you of changing. They will call you cold, difficult, or selfish. But pay attention. Those are often the very people who benefited from your lack of limits. They are not mourning your distance. They are mourning the loss of their control. And though it may hurt, let them go, because those who truly love you will adapt to your boundaries. They will celebrate your wholeness instead of exploiting your absence. There is a quiet power in learning that no is a complete sentence. You do not need to justify your choices with elaborate explanations. You do not need to overcompensate with guilt or shame. You do not need to defend your peace as though it were a crime. When you stand firm in your boundary, you are simply saying, I honor myself, and in honoring yourself, you give others permission to do the same. Think of boundaries as the frame of a painting. Without a frame, the art bleeds out, undefined, unprotected. With a frame, the art is elevated. It has edges that declare, here is where the masterpiece begins, and here is where it ends. Your life is no different. Without boundaries, your essence bleeds into everyone else's story. With them, your essence becomes clear, defined, beautiful. As someone who has lived both without and with boundaries, I can tell you the difference is like night and day. Without them, life feels like drowning in a sea of other people's tides. With them, life feels like standing on the shore, strong and steady, watching the waves come and go without being pulled under. So if you find yourself afraid to draw that line, remember this: a boundary is not the end of love. It is the beginning of true love. The kind that includes you. It is not the end of compassion. It is compassion, finally extended inward. And when you live with sacred boundaries, you discover something precious. Freedom. Freedom not from people, but from the need to betray yourself to keep them. Freedom not from love, but from the illusion that love requires sacrifice. Freedom to give when your heart is full, and freedom to rest when it is not. Boundaries are not about who you keep out. They are about who you allow yourself to become. And in their sacredness, you find not isolation, but wholeness. 6. The guiding principles of the awakened empath. When you begin to awaken as an empath, you realize that life is not meant to be a constant battlefield where you are endlessly drained. It is meant to be a dance, a rhythm of giving and receiving, of openness and discernment, of love that flows but does not drown. And in this dance, there are quiet principles that start to guide you. They are not rigid rules carved in stone. They are more like melodies, subtle but steady, that help you move with grace through a universe that never stops shifting. The first is this: feel everything, but absorb nothing. For so long, you mistook empathy for carrying. You believed that to feel another's sadness meant you had to take it inside, to wear it like your own. But awakening shows you the difference between sensing and shouldering. It's like standing by the ocean. You can feel the waves crash against your feet without needing to drag the entire sea into your lungs. Sensitivity does not mean suffocation. It means awareness. You still notice the tremor in someone's voice, the heaviness in their eyes, but instead of letting it pierce you, and you let it pass through you, like wind through open hands, you realize their storm does not have to become your weather. The second principle: give from overflow, never from depletion. This is where many empaths have stumbled, confusing sacrifice with love. But love given from emptiness is not love. It is obligation wearing a mask. When you learn to fill yourself first, to nourish your own roots, what you give naturally multiplies. It is the difference between pouring from a cracked cup and pouring from a fountain. One leaves you dry, the other keeps flowing, no matter how much you share. The awakened empath discovers that generosity is not measured by how much you lose, but by how much you sustain. Third, love others without losing yourself. For years, you may have believed that love required dissolving into someone else, bending so completely that your own shape vanished. But true love is not erasure. It is presence. It is standing firm in your own essence, while opening your heart to another, like two trees growing side by side. Their roots may intertwine, their branches may touch, but each still grows from its own trunk. When you awaken, you realize that love that asks you to disappear is not love at all. It is hunger, and you were never meant to be consumed. The fourth principle is a gentle but powerful one: help when inspired. End of. Not when guilty, This may be the hardest shift of all, because guilt has been the leash that kept empaths tied for so long. You were trained to believe that if someone was suffering, you must respond, that if someone asked, you could not refuse. But awakening teaches you to listen deeper. Sometimes the most loving act is to step back and allow others to walk their own path. You learn to help not out of compulsion, not out of fear of being rejected, but from a place of genuine inspiration. And when help comes from inspiration, it carries clarity instead of resentment. It heals rather than entangles. And finally, perhaps the most vital trust, your inner knowing over the noise of the world. The awakened empath begins to recognize the quiet voice within as the truest compass, not the shouts of culture, not the expectations of family, not even the urgent cries of those who would rather you carry their pain. In the stillness, your intuition whispers. It points you toward what is real, what is aligned, what is yours to do. And though the world may mock intuition as fragile, you discover it is the strongest thread you can follow. It never lies. These principles are not walls, they are not restrictions. They are rhythms. They keep you steady in a universe that is always moving, always vibrating, always alive. Without them, you are tossed about by every demand, every story, every emotion that crosses your path. With them, you move gracefully, like a dancer who knows the steps, but can also improvise. I will tell you this from experience: the first time you live by these principles, it feels awkward, even rebellious. You may feel the old guilt creep in when you say no. You may wonder if you are hardening when you stop absorbing pain. You may question if you are selfish when you choose to rest instead of overextend. But over time, these principles stop feeling like rebellion. They start feeling like home. And home is exactly what they are. They are the architecture of a life where you are no longer exiled from yourself, where your love does not destroy you, but sustains you, where your sensitivity is not a weakness, but a strength, where your giving does not erase you, but expands you. The awakened empath learns that living by these principles is not about becoming less loving, but more truthful. It is about moving with the natural flow of life rather than fighting against it. Just as the heart must both beat and rest, just as the tide must both rise and fall, so must you both open and protect, give and receive, feel and release. So if you find yourself lost in the noise, unsure where to turn, remember these quiet melodies. Feel, but do not absorb. Give, but not from emptiness. Love, but do not vanish. Help, but only from inspiration. Trust, but trust yourself first. These are not laws to obey. They are invitations to live in balance. And when you live this way, something beautiful happens. Your life stops being a constant leak of energy. It becomes a symphony, one that is both tender and strong, gentle and unshakable, attuned to both your own heart and the larger rhythm of the universe. 7. The falling of the mask. For many years, you may have worn the mask of the good one, the reliable one, the agreeable one, the one who always smiled, even when your chest ached, even when your soul whispered, "This isn't me." At first, this mask may have felt like survival. It kept you safe. It allowed you to belong. It ensured that no one would be upset with you, that no one would withdraw love. And for a time, it worked. You received acceptance. Even if it was conditional, you received approval, even if it required self-erasure. But over time, that mask grew heavy. Each smile that wasn't real added another stone. Each yes spoken against your inner no added another weight. Each act of compliance chipped away at your own breath until you realized you were suffocating. Not from lack of air, but from lack of authenticity. There comes a moment when the mask no longer fits. It doesn't matter how much you try to adjust it. It scratches. It burns. It presses against you like a cage. And finally, you reach a breaking point, not of anger, but of exhaustion. You cannot hold it up any longer. When the mask falls, it does not fall gracefully. It crashes. And when it does, the silence is startling. You hear your own voice again, and it sounds strange at first, like a language you forgot you knew. The first truths you speak feel shaky, even dangerous. Saying "I don't agree" or "I can't do this anymore" may make your hands tremble. Yet even in the trembling, there is relief. The air feels fresher, as though you have been breathing through cloth and suddenly your lungs are free. This is the turning point. You begin to live without the performance. You stop nodding when you mean to shake your head. You stop laughing at jokes that wound your spirit. You stop promising what you cannot give. And yes, this honesty unsettles people, especially those who benefited from your silence, from your willingness to play the role. To them, the real you may feel threatening. They will say, "You've changed," and they are right. You have. But it is not a change into someone else. It is a return to who you always were before the mask. The falling of the mask is not cruelty. It is clarity. It is not rebellion. It is restoration. Because when you speak your truth, you are not pushing others away. You are inviting the right ones closer. Those who loved you only when you were agreeable may drift, but those who love you for your soul, not your service, will remain. At first, you may feel alone. You may grieve the relationships that crumble under the weight of your authenticity. But over time, something beautiful happens. You discover that the people who remain, the ones who accept your no as much as your yes, are far fewer, but infinitely richer. These are the relationships where you can breathe without hiding, where your laughter is real, where your tears are welcome. And most importantly, you discover that you do not need anyone's permission to exist. You no longer gasp for oxygen from someone else's approval. You breathe with your own lungs, on your own terms. That breath is the very definition of freedom. Quantumly speaking, the falling of the mask is like collapsing a false timeline. For years, you were living in a version of reality scripted by fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of conflict. But when the mask falls, the script dissolves. The wave of potential collapses into something new, a reality aligned with truth. And in that alignment, your vibration changes. The frequency of performance gives way to the frequency of presence, and the universe, ever responsive, begins to mirror this authenticity back to you. I will tell you this: the first time you live mask-free, it feels raw. It feels as though the world sees too much, but in time, you realize that what they are seeing is not vulnerability to be exploited, but humanity to be honored. You realize that living without a mask does not make you weaker. It makes you unshakable, because you no longer fear exposure. You are already exposed, and you are still standing. So if you are in that place now, if you feel the mask slipping, if you are terrified of who might leave when it falls, you know this: the mask was never meant to last forever. It served you once, but it is not your destiny. The world does not need your performance. It needs your presence. It needs the truth of you, raw and real, unpolished but alive. And when you let the mask fall, you discover the simplest, most profound truth: you are enough without it. You always were. And now, you finally get to live as if that is true. 8. The inner union of masculine and feminine. Inside each of us lives a quiet duality. One side is tender, soft, receptive, what we might call the feminine. The other is strong, decisive, assertive, the masculine. For much of life, especially for empaths, these two forces often feel like they are in conflict. We are told we must choose. Either be gentle or be strong. Either be nurturing or be firm. Either give or protect. And for years, Many empaths lean so heavily toward one side, usually the softer, more yielding side, that they lose balance. They become rivers with no banks, flowing everywhere, nourishing everyone, but eventually spilling themselves into depletion. Awakening changes this. There comes a moment when you realize that true wholeness does not mean favoring one side over the other. It means weaving them together. Jung called this the inner marriage, the union of masculine and feminine energies within one person. It is not about gender. It is about essence. It is about claiming all that you are, without shame, without denial, without division. For the empath, this union begins as an act of survival. You learn that being soft without strength leaves you vulnerable to exploitation, and being strong without softness leaves you closed, unreachable, cut off from the tenderness that makes life beautiful. So, you begin the work of integration. You allow your gentleness to remain, but you place it inside a container of strength. You allow your assertiveness to rise, but you temper it with compassion. Slowly, you stop swinging like a pendulum between extremes. You begin to live as both soft and firm, giving and receiving, tender and fierce. It is not easy at first. Saying no when you've been trained to say yes feels harsh. Asserting your boundaries may feel like aggression. Allowing yourself to rest and receive may feel selfish. But with time, you start to see that this balance is not cruelty. It is sanity. You start to notice that when you bring strength to your softness, people respect you more deeply. And when you bring softness to your strength, people feel safe around you. It is not about rejecting one side of yourself. It is about inviting them both to the table, letting them speak, and then listening until they find harmony. Think of it like a dance. If one dancer insists on leading all the time, the dance becomes rigid, unyielding. If the other insists on only following, the dance loses direction, spinning aimlessly. But when they move together, one guiding, one responding, both listening, the dance becomes art. That is what happens inside of you. When masculine and feminine join, the result is not chaos. It is choreography. And here is the deeper truth: this union makes you whole. Without it, you are lopsided, always seeking outside what you have not claimed inside. If you deny your strength, you look for others to protect you. If you deny your softness, you seek others to soothe you. But when you embrace both, you stop outsourcing what already belongs to you. You become your own protector and your own nurturer. You carry both the shield and the open hand. And from that wholeness, your relationships transform. You no longer enter them out of neediness, but out of choice. Quantumly speaking, this union creates coherence. Masculine energy is like structure, the skeleton of your frequency. Feminine energy is like flow, the breath that animates it. Alone, each creates imbalance. Together, they generate resonance, a vibration that is steady, expansive, and magnetic. This is why people who embody this union feel both grounding and inspiring to be around. They are not half searching for completion. They radiate completion from within. As someone who has walked this path, I can tell you the first time you feel this balance inside, it is like standing in sunlight after years of shadow. You no longer apologize for being strong. You no longer apologize for being tender. You realize that both are divine, both are necessary, both belong to you. And in that realization, shame dissolves. So, if you find yourself struggling, feeling too soft in a hard world, or too guarded to let love in, know that the answer is not to swing to the opposite extreme. The answer is to invite the other side of you home. If you've always been gentle, allow your strength to rise. If you've always been hard, allow your tenderness to breathe. The goal is not to erase one, but to harmonize both. When this union settles inside you, you no longer walk as half a being. You walk whole. You no longer fear being used. Because your strength stands guard. You no longer fear being unloved. Because your softness shines through. You become a paradox, gentle yet unshakable, yielding yet rooted, compassionate yet discerning. And paradox, in the language of the soul, is not contradiction. It is completion. This is the gift of the inner marriage. It does not make you someone else. It makes you entirely yourself. And in that wholeness, you finally stop searching for others to complete you. You discover that you are always enough, soft and strong, open and steady, giver and receiver. You breathe more freely. You live more authentically. And you love, not out of desperation, but out of abundance. 9. Conscious sensitivity. For most of your life, sensitivity may have felt like both a blessing and a curse. You walk through the world with an open heart, feeling every subtle shift in the air, every unspoken word, every ripple of tension in a room. You could sense sadness behind a smile, anger hidden beneath politeness, exhaustion masked by laughter. And while this gift made you compassionate, it also made life heavy, because instead of simply noticing these vibrations, you absorbed them. They sank into your body like stones in water, weighing you down until you couldn't tell where your emotions ended and someone else's began. This is what I call passive sensitivity, the state of being wide open without direction, like a sponge that soaks up everything in reach. At first, you thought this was what empathy meant. You thought being loving meant carrying. You thought being present meant taking on what wasn't yours. But in truth, passive sensitivity is not love. It is self-abandonment, dressed as compassion. The shift happens when you awaken, when you begin to realize that your sensitivity does not need to be a weakness. It can become conscious. Conscious sensitivity is the art of feeling deeply without drowning, of noticing without absorbing, of allowing yourself to be touched by life without being consumed by it. It is the difference between standing in the rain and letting yourself be drenched, or standing with an open umbrella. It's still aware of the rain, but no longer soaked through. When you step into conscious sensitivity, the world feels different. The same vibrations still reach you. The grief, the joy, the subtle currents of energy flowing through every interaction. But now you hold them lightly. You can feel the sadness in someone's voice without making it your own. You can recognize someone's anger without letting it ignite your nervous system. You can sit with another's fear without shrinking into it. You are aware, deeply aware, but you are also free. This freedom is not coldness. It is clarity. It allows you to love more purely because you are no longer entangled in what is not yours. When you absorb another's pain unconsciously, your compassion becomes muddied by exhaustion, resentment, and confusion. But when you witness with conscious sensitivity, you hold space instead of weight. You offer presence instead of depletion. You become a mirror in which others can see themselves clearly, not a sponge that hides their reflection inside your body. Think of it like tuning an instrument. Passive sensitivity is like playing every note you hear, even if it doesn't belong to your song. Conscious sensitivity is learning to listen, to discern, to play only what resonates with your own melody. The music is still rich, but now it is intentional. It has shape, rhythm, harmony. And here is the miracle. Once you learn this way of being, sensitivity becomes your superpower. While others miss the subtleties of life, do you catch them? You see the truth behind the mask. You feel the shift in energy before words are spoken. You hear what is left unsaid. But unlike before, this awareness does not break you. It strengthens you. You can navigate relationships with wisdom, choosing where to step closer and where to step back. You can move through the world with discernment, knowing what is yours to hold and what is not. Quantumly speaking, This is coherence. When your energy field is defined, when your vibration is steady, outside frequencies no longer destabilize you. Instead, you become the steady rhythm that influences the room. People feel calmer around you, not because you absorb their chaos, but because you embody peace. Your frequency no longer bends to every storm. It becomes the lighthouse guiding others back to shore. Of course, this shift does not happen overnight. It is a practice. You learn it in moments, when you catch yourself absorbing tension in a room and remind yourself, this is not mine. When you notice your body tightening at someone's anger and gently breathe, releasing what you cannot carry. Each time you practice, the distinction grows clearer. Your yes becomes stronger, your no becomes firmer, and your presence becomes more luminous. I know from experience that this feels like stepping into a new kind of power. For years, you may have feared that hardening was the only way to survive, that the only way to stop drowning was to build walls. But conscious sensitivity is not about walls. It is about filters, boundaries made of clarity rather than concrete. You remain open, but not defenseless. You remain tender, but not fragile. You remain empathic, but not exhausted. So if you are walking this path now, if your sensitivity has felt like too much, if you have wondered why you carry weight, that is not yours. Know that the gift is still there. It was never the sensitivity that hurt you. It was the unconsciousness. Once you bring awareness to it, once you learn to feel without absorbing, to notice without drowning, your sensitivity becomes your light. And the world needs that light. Not another hardened heart, not another closed soul, but a sensitivity that is awake, intentional, sof-ein, a sensitivity that sees clearly, loves deeply, and yet remains rooted in its own truth. This is conscious sensitivity, not a burden, not a curse, but a superpower waiting for you to claim it. From burden to freedom, the empath's true liberation. So, what truly happens when the empath stops trying to please everyone? What shifts when they finally set down the weight of being all things to all people? They do not become cold, as some might fear. They do not lose their compassion, as they once believed they might. Instead, they become clear about who they are, clear about what is theirs to carry, and clear about how to love without disappearing. They no longer confuse self-sacrifice with kindness. They no longer mistake exhaustion for love. They no longer believe that compassion means swallowing every ounce of pain around them. Instead, they begin to see that compassion, to be real, must flow both outward and inward. It must include the one who is giving it. And in that moment of realization, something shifts forever. The empath is no longer a victim of other people's emotions. They are no longer tossed like a small boat on someone else's storm. They become the steady current, the conscious architect of the energy they choose to live within. This transformation is not small. It is not merely a personal adjustment. It is a revolution, because each time one person chooses authenticity over performance, they become a mirror for others to do the same. Each time someone dares to drop the mask, they give silent permission for the people around them to breathe freely too. This is how collective change begins. Not with slogans or demands, but with one soul, living in truth, showing others that it can be done. The empath's journey from unconscious giving to conscious sovereignty is not an easy one. It feels, at times, like breaking apart. It feels like loss. Relationships fall away. Old patterns dissolve. The world you knew rearranges itself as you step into a new vibration. And yet, through the grief, something luminous emerges. For what is lost was never truly love. It was dependency, expectation, an unconscious contract written in silence. You give endlessly, and in return, you are conditionally accepted. When that contract burns, what remains is freedom. And in that freedom, sensitivity itself changes shape. It no longer feels like a curse, a constant vulnerability to the world's chaos. It becomes a key, a doorway, a superpower you still feel deeply, perhaps even more deeply than before. But you no longer drown, you choose what to carry, and you release what is not yours. You see the world not through the haze of depletion, but through the clarity of presence, and presence, true presence, is the greatest gift you can offer. This is why the transformation of the empath is so powerful. It is not simply about survival, it is about liberation. It is about reclaiming the right to exist as you are. Tender, strong, discerning, open. It is about remembering that you were never born to be the world's emotional landfill. You were born to be light, to love, yes, but also to breathe, to give, yes, but also to receive, to carry compassion, yes, but never at the cost of your own soul. I have lived this journey, and I know the fear of it. The fear that people will leave if you show your true face. The fear that love will vanish if you stop giving it away without end. The fear that standing tall in your truth will mean standing alone. And for a while, it does. There is a loneliness in the shedding, a quiet grief in the letting go. But then, in the stillness that follows, you discover something extraordinary. You do not need the approval you once begged for. You do not need the validation you once sacrificed yourself to earn. You have yourself, and in having yourself, you are no longer empty. From this place, your life takes on a new rhythm. You attract those who respect your boundaries instead of resenting them. You find relationships rooted in mutual honor rather than silent contracts of exploitation. You give not because you are compelled, but because you are inspired. You help not because you fear rejection, but because your heart is full enough to overflow. Love becomes free again, not chained by guilt, not driven by fear, but flowing naturally, like water finding its path. And so, if you are listening to these words, and you recognize yourself in them, know this: your sensitivity is not your curse. It is your doorway. It is not the weight that will break you. It is the key that will set you free. The very thing you feared, your depth of feeling, is the thing that will heal you once it becomes conscious. When the empath stops pleasing everyone, they do not lose themselves. They find themselves. They do not become less loving. They become love itself. Love that includes them. Love that sustains them. Love that radiates without erasing. And when even one empath makes this shift, the world becomes a little freer, a little brighter, a little braver. Because the truth is simple: every time one soul dares to live authentically, they hand a torch to another. And eventually, the dark forest that once felt endless begins to glow. Pathways open, shadows lift, and slowly, step by step, we all remember sensitivity was never a prison. It was always the map home.